Hello everybody, my name is Emma. Today I'd like to read to you a chapter of A Little History of Economics by Niall Kishtainy. Chapter 12, Shut Out the Sun. In the 1840s, an economist sent a joke letter to the French Parliament claiming to be written by candle manufacturers. In it, the candle makers complain that they're being ruined by a competition from a rival who's flooding the market with light at a rock-bottom price. Who's the fearsome competitor threatening to drive them out of business? It's the sun. The candle makers ask Parliament to pass a law requiring the closing of all windows and curtains and the blocking up of any holes that let in sunlight. The law would help save the candle factories and to help make France rich, they say. The author of the letter was making fun of business people who constantly complain about competition from foreign products. They may try to present their arguments as being about the good of a nation as a whole. All they really care about is gaining an advantage for their own companies. Today we still hear lots of complaints about foreign competition. For example, when American and British steel manufacturers grumble about the cheap Chinese steel sold on their own countries. After Adam Smith, economists realized the importance of allowing countries to trade freely with each other. Free trade means that goods are treated the same wherever they happen to be from. Cheap Indian cloth isn't banned from Britain or restricted in any way. British consumers are free to buy whatever cloth they like, and if Indian cloth happens to be cheaper, they'll buy it instead of British cloth. It was the British economist David Ricardo who really perfected the economic argument for free trade. Countries should specialize in the productions of the goods that they can make relatively cheaply and then trade with other countries, he said. All countries then gain. But there are economists in the 19th century who might have had sympathy for the candle makers, even if they wouldn't have tried to ban sunshine. To them, it wasn't always true that free trade made countries wealthy. To them, it could do the opposite. One of these economists was the German Friedrich List, 1789 to 1846. He started out as a believer in free trade, but in the 1820s visited the United States. Many Americans then disagreed with the British classical economists' argument for free trade. America's new society needed a new economics, different from that of the old society of Britain, they said. Alexander Hamilton, Thomas Jefferson, the author of America's Declaration of Independence, even tried to stop publication of Ricardo's work in America. Alexander Hamilton, another of America's founding fathers, put forward his own view of trade, totally different from that of the British economists. Hamilton was one of the authors of the Federalist Papers, a series of essays published after America gained its independence from Britain, which is how the new nation should work. He talks of the establishment of a specifically American economic system and argued that the government should help to build American industry. Foreign countries try to help their own industries by making it hard for American companies to sell their goods and their lands, and Hamilton thought that America should do the same for its own industries. Ricardo's idea of free trade simply wasn't the answer for America. In his national system of political economy, List developed Hamilton's idea, setting himself apart from British economists, Smith and Ricardo. Like most economists today, believe that trade between countries isn't much different from that between people. It's just the buying and selling of goods between individuals who happen to be separated by a border. When you buy some onions from your local greengrocer, both you and the greengrocer gain. What could possibly be the objection to your buying onions from a foreign supplier? List said that it was wrong to think of trade between countries as the same as that between individuals, because different nations are more than groups of people with different passports. Countries have their own histories, cultures, and ways of governing themselves. They're all at different stages. Some are advanced industrial societies, and some are still mainly agricultural. In this time, Britain was taking off, going through an industrial revolution and economically pulling ahead of America, France, and Germany. For the other countries to have a chance of repeating Britain's success, they'd have to do something other than the adoption of free trade, said List. He believed that economic progress was about creating an economy based on industries and factories rather than farms. But early on, new industries are like children. As a child, you're nurtured and cared for. You're not expected to compete for a job to earn money. You're given the time to learn skills that one day will allow you to face the world on your own as an adult. According to List, infant industries need to be nurtured if they are to grow up. Suppose that Germany wants to develop new industries such as steel and chemicals, as it did in the 19th century. Success would be obstructed by production of steel and chemicals in more economically advanced countries such as Britain. Producers in the leading country have learned how to make goods more cheaply than anyone else because they've had lots of practice. They've ironed out glitches in production methods and their workers are highly efficient. The problem is how to establish a new industry at home when there's a more advanced competitor in a foreign country. German buyers would always want the cheaper British goods, and the new industry wouldn't stand a chance. List's proposal was to shield new industries from foreign competition. One way is to put a tax or a tariff on foreign goods. A German tariff on British steel makes British steel costlier for Germans. If the tariff is high enough, then it makes British steel more expensive than German steel. People would then buy German steel, and so German's infant steel industry would survive. Economists call this policy protection. A child learns carpentry not by knowing in theory how wooden boxes and shelves are made, but by practicing sawing and hammering over and over. By being helped to stay in business, the new industry gets a practice until it masters the line of products and has a chance of competing with foreign manufacturers. At this point, the tariff can be removed and free trade established. A new industrial sector has been created. And by repeating the same thing in other sectors, the whole economy can be industrialized. Putting tariffs on foreign goods is costly because people end up paying more for what they buy. But List considered the cost to be well worth it. As the infant industries mature, the economy advances. He likened it to a parent who makes an effort today to help their child learn a skill, like carpentry, that will come in useful in the future. To list, then, the principle of free trade was valid at all times and in all places. Free trade was beneficial between countries or regions that were at the same stage of development. The various regions of Germany in the 19th century, for example, but it wasn't a good idea between countries at very different stages. Industries in more advanced countries would simply wipe out those in other countries. He criticized the British economists for the cosmopolitanism. What he meant was that they believed that whatever theory applied to the economy of Britain also applied to that of France, Germany, or Russia. So if free trade was good for Britain, then it must be good for the others. What free trade really meant was freedom for Britain to dominate other countries' economies. The 19th century is often called the century of free trade, the era that proved the classical economics correct. In the 1840s, Britain got rid of its corn laws, which had stopped the import of foreign grain to Britain and so protected British agriculture from foreign competition. Abolishing them was a step towards free trade. Over the century, connections between nations multiplied because it was established by force. Creating a global economy in which people routinely bought and sold across borders all sorts of things such as wheat, cotton, and tea. Sometimes, though, free trade was hardly free because it was established by force. In the middle of the 19th century, Britain and France went to war with China, in part because the Chinese tried to prevent British traders from selling opium into China. China tried to prevent British traders from selling opium to China. China was defeated, and Britain forced it to open its markets to British goods. This was a world away from how Ricardo viewed free trade as a completely voluntary exchange of goods between nations. And despite the steps towards free trade in the 19th century, quite a lot of protection remained. Lists argued that protection had been essential to the development of Europe's leading economies, even to Britain. Even so, most economists nowadays are on Smith and Ricardo's side and distrust List's argument for protecting young industries. They believe that protection rewards incompetence and waste. Competition between firms is useful because businesses that make low-quality products can go bust. Their workforces and buildings can then be used by other people to make better products. Protection, economists fear, stop that from happening because it helps inefficient firms to stay in business. In the 20th century, many countries in Africa and Asia protected their industries from foreign competition. The result in many places was lots of inefficient and unprofitable firms. List also had a different view from the classical economists about the basic method of economics. What kinds of questions economists should ask and how they should answer them. Economists make all sorts of claims. Trades that make countries rich, more people mean less food to go around, and so on. And they often disagree. How do they come up with their ideas about how the economy works? It's important because this is to do with This is to do with how economists convince each other of the truth. List said that economists had to start with facts and little history. What industries existed in a country? How many workers did they have? And what kind of technologies did they use to produce things? Armed with this sort of information, you might be able to draw conclusions about how an economy worked and what policies should be used to develop it. The other way of doing economics was to use abstract reasoning, as David Ricardo did. He started with basic principles and reasoned towards a conclusion. His arguments seemed to depend more on logic than on history and facts. List rejected the idea that you could produce broad economic principles from logic alone. How would you know whether they really worked in different places, in backwards Russia, just as well as in advanced Britain? In the 1980s, the debate turned into a fight for the soul of economics among German-speaking economists. It was remembered as the Battle of the Methods. On one side was the group of economists who, like List, thought that economics should be based first and foremost on history and concrete facts. And on the other side, those who thought that it should be a search for abstract theories. In the end, it became clear that both sides had a point. Theories need to be tested against historical experience. On the other hand, a mass of facts quickly becomes meaningless without theories to sort through them. From then on, economics embraced both the world of facts and the world of theory. Even so, as economics developed, the economists who invented new theories rather than those who trawled through historical records and statistics gained the greatest renown. Economists fell in love with mathematics, and they used it to create all sorts of elaborate theories that were based on general concepts rather than specific facts about the economy. Not everyone agreed with this emphasis, though. To this day, critics of economics complain that the subject has become rather removed from reality and that it's turned into a mathematical game rather than the study of actual facts about the economy. Facts that affect real people's lives. That's all for today. Bye.